Dive buddies, this is Scuba Goat
Under the sea.
the podcast for the inquisitive diver.
Hey there, dive buddies, and welcome to the show. Now, marine debris is clearly a major concern for the wildlife in our oceans and seas, but to what extent and who is responsible? Can we find the source of this waste and lay blame at the feet of past generations who were oblivious to the effect it was having? Or is it an ever-increasing issue that has the potential to collapse the world's aquatic ecosystem? There is a multitude of reasons for the negative impact the human race is having on this fragile Earth, and there are many fantastic organisations, foundations, operations, and charities out there, all striving to raise awareness and make the change for the good of Mother Earth. It goes without saying that any positive change is a good outcome, but how do we know what change is needed to be made? Every now and then, we need to tip our caps and recognise those organisations and groups, and even individuals who conduct the research, source irrefutable proof that change is required, and provide the building blocks to a possible solution. During this episode, I speak to marine biologist and shark fanatic Kristian Parton. He is the lead author of a recently published scientific paper focusing on the direct impact of microplastics on demersal sharks. This paper is the first of its kind and considered to be a baseline for the future research into the direct impact of plastics on sharks, or more precisely, in sharks. With the support from Godley and the University of Exeter, the Shark Trust and Citizen Science, Kristian also created the Shark and Ray Entanglement Network, more commonly known as ShaREN. ShaREN openly invites the global community to aid in their research by reporting any entanglement found, all in a bid to identify the species that may be at more risk, any global hotspots for entanglement, and the types of debris affecting sharks and rays. Join me as I learn more about each subject, Kristian, and his future aspirations as a diver and scientist. Kristian, welcome to the show, buddy. How are you doing?
Very well, thanks, Matt. How are you?
I'm not too shabby, not too shabby. I'm at the opposite end of the world, so clearly you're having an alcoholic drink while I'm having morning coffee.
I definitely have my pre-prepared cocktail here because it is 7 o'clock here in Florida. So I feel like the timing works a little bit better for me to have a cocktail than you.
Yeah, there'd be a serious problem if I was doing it right now.
Each to their own.
Oh dear. Okay, so let's talk. Let's start off with let's talk about you to start with. Let's tell people who you are and what you get up to and why there's a lot of sharks swimming behind you.
So yeah, my name's Kristian Parton. I'm a researcher at the University of Exeter, based down in Cornwall in the UK. I'm not there at the moment. I'm actually across here in the United States, visiting family, but most of the time I spend down in Cornwall in the UK, and my research has been involved with sharks now for probably the best part of the last 3 years or so. So yeah, I've been doing shark research for a long time. I've loved sharks for such a long time, and it's what I've always wanted to do. And for those listening at home, we're on a Zoom call at the moment. I've got a lovely little green screen behind me of some scalloped hammerhead sharks from the Galapagos. So
yeah, I'm not jealous at all. You can see my refrigerator behind me.
Yeah, it's the contrast has got. You need one of these green screens behind you.
I know. I keep telling the missus I need to buy a new computer, but I also want a new dry suit. So,
it's a tough one. Probably the dry suit is gonna benefit you more, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that at some point someone will sponsor me, and that'll do. Okay, so this paper that we're going to talk about, I've had a good read on it as well. It's super cool, I must say, and rather geeky to the scientific level that I had to use the dictionary and look at quite a few words, but there we go.
Yeah, sometimes we have to throw in a few big words in there and hope people Google them or something.
Yeah, that was me. Yeah, there was a lot of Googling going on. Okay, so how did it come about? I mean, you're working as a researcher at the University in Exeter. Was this a paper that you were working on for a degree, or was it something post-education?
Yeah, so I did my undergraduate degree at the University of Exeter in zoology. Quite a broad spectrum of understanding. I knew that I was always more interested in the marine side of things, but having that broad understanding in zoology, I think, is quite important for me, kind of going into the future and not sort of specializing too much too soon. And so at the end of that undergraduate degree, I decided to stay on and do what's called a master's by research, which is essentially like a mini PhD. And I was kind of thinking about things that I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to do something on shark species, but what that was going to be was up to me. So I really started doing some digging, and I think we all know how big a problem plastic pollution is and how prominent it's been in the media now for at least the last 5 years or so. I think Blue Planet 2, when that came out, the David Attenborough BBC TV series, that really kind of shone a light on the impact of plastic pollution in the marine environment. So it's just sort of grown as a science industry really in the last 5 years or so, kind of exponentially. We have so many scientists now who are looking at the effects of plastic pollution across a broad range of species. But I kind of decided to pair the two together. So my passion for sharks and plastic pollution. And I didn't really know that much about it. We didn't kind of understand whether plastic pollution was impacting sharks at all, other than, a few anecdotal reports here and there. So it was a case of trying to find a sort of a knowledge gap in the scientific literature and to then fill that knowledge gap and to really look into it in further detail. And we started to find more and more about it, and it ended up actually being quite shocking.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I was looking through that report that you've come up with. I mean, it's kind of left me with lots of thought routes, to be honest. But you kind of assume nowadays that the aquatic life in our oceans are affected by plastics in some form or another. But to read that you're able to collate the information and the evidence of these plastics from within sharks and decide where it's originated from, I think it's pretty damn outstanding work.
Yeah, I mean, it was a challenge. There's no question about it, and that largely came down to the fact that the reporting of it is not standardized and hasn't been standardized at all. So we're essentially relying on dribs and drabs throughout the literature, and then it's a case of literally scrolling through and bringing them all together in one place, and then looking at that data set and trying to find patterns and trying to see different potentially different entangling materials or different entanglement hotspots around the world, and to collate that all together was a challenge. There's no question about it, but I absolutely loved doing it. It was really, really fun to do after the kind of initial data collection part went and we really got stuck into the data. It was interesting to see, definitely.
So how did you get the data as well? Because I mean, you've got this concept of I want to research sharks and plastics in their stomachs, all this kind of stuff. How on earth did you do it in such a manner that's not harmful and not offensive to the ecosystem?
So the two kind of papers that I had throughout the Masters by Research, one specifically focused on entanglement within plastic debris. So that's sharks that have been swimming along and they've got something caught on them, or they're caught in something like ghost fishing gear, for example. And then the other paper was looking at the ingestion of microplastics. So both papers both fell under the umbrella of plastic pollution, but that's two very different issues. So in terms of the microplastic ingestion stuff, we were essentially relying on sharks that had been caught as bycatch in a fishery down in Cornwall. So it wasn't a case of us kind of going out and just slinging a load of sharks out of the ocean and cutting them up. Unfortunately, these sharks are caught as bycatch in this fishery, and more often than not, they're just going to be sold cheap as chips on a market or thrown overboard because they're almost worthless. So it was literally a case of me. I remember I went down to Penzance, which is a fishing town in Cornwall, probably about 10 o'clock in the morning to go and meet with a fisherman. And I remember I drove down, about 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I was meeting this fisherman in a pub. He'd just come back in after a week at sea. Obviously, he's going to the pub, regardless of what time it is. So I remember I drove down, walked into this pub, and it's a proper hardy fisherman's pub. You know, they've got things on the wall, the pictures on the wall. And I walk in, and three fishermen who are sat at the bar kind of turn around and look at me, and I'm just this skinny boy in tight jeans and a super dry t-shirt, and they're thinking, "Who is this guy? Who is this guy?" And I asked the lady working behind the bar for Alan, the fisherman that I was meeting, and he's outside having a cigarette with his pint at 10 o'clock in the morning. And it was just one of those situations that I found myself in where I was like, this is such a bizarre scenario. But we sat and we chatted, and he was super keen to be involved in the research and really, really wanted to help out. And then I essentially relied on him for getting those shark samples. And then it was a case of every so often driving down to Penzance, sticking 6, 7, 8 sharks in the boot of my car and driving them back up to the university and getting them in the freezers before they thawed out, which another seriously strange scenario to have is me driving my car from Penzance back to Falmouth, which is a good 45-minute drive with 8 sharks in the boot of the car. It's just absolutely bizarre. But to have someone like Alan, who is a fisherman who's worked in the industry for over 35 years, was something that was really important, and he was fundamental for me getting the samples that I needed for those sharks.
Yeah. Has he just picking up on there? You said he's been in the industry for 35 years. Did he have any kind of comments on how fishing has changed over those years that he's been operating?
Yeah, I think if you spoke to most people working in the fishing industry now, they would have something to say about the fishing industry. Of course, it's changed so much over the years, purely from a gear perspective. So the type of equipment that they're using has changed, and they're getting so much more ability to find fish easily. So from that perspective, it's changed so much, but also from a sort of political perspective as well. I think with everything that's going on politically in the UK with Brexit, means that the scope for fishing is continuously changing, and a lot of them don't really know what to expect in the coming years. And I think he expressed some concern regarding that. But it's one of those things where he just has to wait and see, because you have no idea what it's going to be like in 6 months' time, a year's time, 5 years' time. You just don't know. So I think he did express some concerns about that. But having worked in the industry for so long, he's managed to build his career up to the point where he's fairly secure in the work that he does, and can provide for the crew that he has, and his family as well.
Yeah, comfortable enough to go to the pub when he gets off the boat.
10 o'clock in the morning, and well, it depends how long he's going to be staying in that pub for, how many pints he wants.
We didn't introduce ShaREN, and when I was looking through your bits and pieces online, I kind of assumed that the research paperwork on the ingestion of plastics came before ShaREN. But you just
it was actually the other way around.
The other way around.
So Yeah, ShaREN and the entanglement. So for those at home, ShaREN is not a person. ShaREN is a citizen science project. ShaREN is an acronym that stands for the Shark and Ray Entanglement Network, and that was sort of my brainchild that came of that first entanglement paper. So when we were writing the paper, initially we had written somewhere towards the bottom that there could be the scope for some kind of online recording method for people where they could kind of submit their sightings of entangled sharks. And I thought to myself, well, why can't we do that? We could make that that software and that project. And so we approached the Shark Trust, who are a fantastic shark charity based in Plymouth in the UK, and kind of came to them and said, look, we've got this idea. We'd love to have you guys on board with it. And they were very, very keen to be involved in it. And ShaREN was born. And ShaREN's been ticking over now for probably the last, I would say, year and a half, maybe just under a year and a half. Okay. And has been collecting recordings of shark and ray entanglements all over the world. And it's amazing to see some of those coming in. I think at the moment we're stood at something like 150, maybe just shy of 150 shark or ray entanglement reports, which is more than we found in the scientific literature from like the 1940s to present day, and also more than we found on Twitter as well, which was part of the searching that we did in that paper. Yeah. So it's just a kind of another thing that's showing that this issue is probably happening at far higher levels than we think it is, and so we need to get that data in to prove that it's happening at higher levels. And if we can prove that it's happening at higher levels, and where it's happening at higher levels, and perhaps what debris types these animals are being entangled in, then we can start putting in policies to try and reduce that impact. And that's the most important thing. That's what we want out of this, is we want this to be less common than it is at the moment. But we can't do that until we know how common it is and where it is and all these different factors. So that was essentially what the purpose of ShaREN was to collect more data, and it's doing its job.
I think it's a fantastic idea. I mean, the amount of diving that I do and have done over the years, I can't emphasize how common it is to see large pelagic fish either wrapped in fishing lines or nets or hooks hanging out of their faces. It's just so common. In fact, when I first saw ShaREN, when we initially started speaking a few weeks ago, I immediately tagged a couple of friends. Jason Fondis from Nusa Penida, who was on the show an episode or two ago with his manta rescue. It's just so common, and I think it's probably the naivety of the common people that you don't see it, so it doesn't happen. So I think ShaREN's a great platform to make people wake up to the reality of it.
And that's what we want. And me having that conversation with you led to 2 more entanglement sightings that we have on the database. We need eyes. We need eyes, and the best people to see that are divers. Divers see this thing sometimes on a daily basis, and to have more eyes on the issue and to have more people kind of redirecting other people towards ShaREN and spreading the message and saying, look, we've seen this entanglement incident. You can report that to this citizen science project. To have those almost foot soldiers, essentially, out in the field, the people who are seeing this, to have those people on board and to have those people know about what ShaREN is and what we're trying to achieve is going to be fundamental for the success of the project, because without those eyes and without those foot soldiers out there, we're just not going to get the reports. Because there's no way that I have the capacity to be able to see everything that's going on in the world regarding shark and ray entanglements. But if I have a network of people that can see it and find it and report it, that's the whole purpose of the project.
Yeah. Oh, good on you. Well, let's see if we can push it out a little bit more, make it more globally aware. You can give me all the hashtags and stuff like that at the towards the end of the chat, and we'll
definitely
we'll get them in a description.
We're so active on Twitter with ShaREN at the moment, so that's the main platform that we're using currently to sort of push the project. But as we get bigger, we're going to go across all the social media platforms onto Facebook and to Instagram, just because that will increase our reach to people around the world, and the more people we reach, the more data we're going to get. And that's why citizen science projects are such an amazing tool for scientists, because how could you not want more data and more people collecting that data, and it's a way for the general public to also actively engage with science itself.
Sure.
So a lot of people think, well, what can I do? I work my 9 to 5, I'm in an office or something like that, but if you scroll through social media, sometimes you might spot something online. You might spot a random entanglement that none of us have seen yet, and redirecting that to us is exactly what we want.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It doesn't have to be recorded by the individual who's reporting it. It's just making you guys aware that the video footage is there.
Yeah, exactly. If people don't really want to send the link to ShaREN to a report that they've spotted, they can literally tag us, and we will do that work. That's what we're wanting. We want to be made alert to these sightings that are appearing across the social media channels. And it's one of those things where social media often gets a lot of flack, deservedly so in some cases, that is for sure, but it can be used as this really, really powerful tool to kind of generate data. The data that's available on social media sites at the moment is astronomical. And finding a way to get our teeth into that data is something that's going to be really important moving into the future.
Well, I'll help as much as I can. I mean, I've got we're just making a website for this podcast, and I've got a website for my travel agency, scuba diving travel agency. So over to you on that one, chap. You can write a blog article all about it, and I'll post it on both websites for you.
I'm more than happy to write a blog for you, of course.
I also have to pass on huge thanks from Engel Tani, who's the dive master in Komodo. He was over the moon to see his video has helped.
Definitely. I mean, he really, really had a go trying to get that line off the manta ray. If anyone hasn't seen that video yet, very, very impressive video. And now we have that data on ShaREN, and it's going to be used in the future to help inform policy. And what more could you want?
Well, the shorter version shows Engel getting dragged around somewhat, but did you see the entire footage where the manta kept coming back to the surface to wait to get freed up? It's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows you as well how intelligent these animals are. I've been so lucky enough to swim with or scuba dive, with manta rays on the east coast of Africa before, and you can see it in their eyes as they swim past, and kind of they're checking you out with that massive eyeball. There is something else going on inside that animal's head, and that there's something more there than it just being another fish.
It's east coast of Africa. Was that the Megafauna Foundation?
Yeah, so I was at a project called All Out Africa, which is in Mozambique, and we were partnered really, really closely with MMF. And yeah, they had like a little base right next to the All Out Africa base. So and that was back when I was a little young whippersnapper, 18, 19-year-old, and getting out and learning how to dive. I think I did my PADI advanced open water there in Mozambique, and what a place to do it in terms of the megafauna that we had the opportunity to see. It was unbelievable. Yeah, and the MMF guys are doing great stuff over there.
Incidentally, where did diving start for you?
So diving started officially started. It was actually in Mozambique back when I think I was 15. I was on holiday with my parents, and my dad had been scuba diving for a number of years, and I think he was advanced at the time, and was really trying to coax me into it. I think I was a little bit apprehensive at first because I've sometimes had problems with my sinuses, so I didn't know how equalizing was going to go. But I went out on one of those, I can't remember what they're called, sort of like a taster dive thing where you do a little bit in the pool and then they take you out with the instructor who kind of holds your tank. And we went out together, and that was my first ever dive, which was amazing. And it's actually incidentally where I saw my first ever shark species, which was an oceanic whitetip that just came cruising out of nowhere. And I was kind of looking along the bottom, not really paying attention. And my instructor, who's got me by the back of the tank, is shaking me and pointing and saying, look at this shark. And I just saw it come cruising towards us and then just sort of shifted off in the opposite direction. But it was just an unbelievable experience, and my first experience of a shark. And I think that's where the love of sharks also was just solidified from being a kid and playing with sharks in the bathtub to seeing a real one in the water. That passion and that love for those animals just grew stronger. And then after that taster dive, I loved the diving so much that I did my open water qualification in Falmouth in Cornwall,
Nice.
which was a little bit chilly. Significantly less sharks, although I did again see a lesser spotted dogfish on one of my first dives over there, which is now was now one of my study species for the microplastic ingestion. Okay. So seeing that again, in Falmouth was amazing, and just it's solidifying that love for sharks, because it's not often you get to see them, and I've learned that over the years. Now as the years have gone on, I feel like I've just been terribly unlucky with shark sightings. I seem to barely see them out in the natural environment.
You need to get in the water right now. Back in the UK, I was speaking with Paul Toomer, who's the president of RAID, and he lives down in, I think it's Dorset, Cornwall, something like that. But he was saying that the diving at the moment is just ridiculously good, and there's been countless sightings and constant sightings of blue sharks off the coast.
Yeah, so blue sharks down in Cornwall, I think a lot of people actually don't realise we get blue sharks in the UK, and they're a seasonal summer visitor, and you can see them off the coast of Penzance, you can see them off the coast of Newquay, a few miles offshore. And every time I have been on a trip to see the blue sharks and get in the water with them, I have not had the opportunity to do it. I've either seen them at the surface and they've gone, or I've missed them by a day or something. I'm devastated by it, because seeing all these images at the moment. I actually worked on a project called the UK Blue Shark Project for about a year or so, collecting some data for them, and went out a couple of times with them, and just got terribly unlucky with the sightings, and have never really managed to get in the water with them. So being over here in Florida at the moment and seeing, I've got friends who are posting pictures with them. I see the dive companies are, and it's just enraging. Yeah.
And all the time everyone's looking at you going, oh, he's in Florida, it's going to be great diving, but you're jealous of what's back home.
Yeah, that's how it goes, isn't it? That's how it goes every time. I think I'm super unlucky, but so I think it's given me a bit more of an appreciation for actually seeing a shark in its natural environment, because now I know how rare that is, and how special that can be. So every time I see one now, it feels like the first
Yeah.
time.
Circling back, we're digressing. We're starting to talk about sharks and diving. Your papers. Let's go back to your papers. What's the future for these now? Clearly, ShaREN is going to be an ongoing thing, and hopefully ever expanding as well. But thinking back to your other paper on the ingestion of plastics, is there an end game to that one, or is that going to be a continual open book as well?
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be an open book. So the purpose of the microplastic ingestion paper was to provide this what we call an empirical baseline. So that's a baseline of microplastic ingestion based on evidence and data. And so we wanted to have this sort of empirical baseline for these UK shark species. And so it means now that as work progresses on these species in and around the UK, and also other parts of the world where they're found as well, the paper can act as a sort of direct comparison for anyone else who's doing research on a similar issue, and they can compare their results to what we found. But at the moment, I'm taking a little bit of a break from it. My master's by research is finished. I've submitted my thesis, so that's all done. But it's something that I would, without a shadow of a doubt, love to go back to and investigate further at some point in the future, because there are still a lot of unknowns with it. We don't know how these fibers might be impacting the sharks at a molecular biological level. We're trying to kind of figure that out at the moment for a lot of different species. So to know what those effects are on the sharks is going to be really important to assess how much of a threat it is. We know that ingestion of microplastics and other forms of fibers has shown consequences on, internal systems of other fish species, for example, their immune system or their endocrine system. So it's had effects on other fish, but we need to start finding out whether the same thing is happening with the shark species. At the moment, we don't quite know. So to find that out is going to be a very, very important next step, and is something that I would love to do again with the species that I worked with. But I'm almost 100% sure that someone is doing something somewhere on sharks and microplastics. I know that I had to listen to the podcast a few weeks back, and you mentioned MMF in Indonesia, and I know there's a great scientist over there, Elitsa Germanoff, who's done some brilliant microplastics work with manta rays. So there's stuff going on at the moment, and this field is going to grow, and we're going to get more knowledgeable on the issue as the years go by.
Yeah, and I suppose if anything, it needs a little bit of direction to pull it all together.
Yeah, definitely. We always need a direction, and we always want to have new questions to answer. As scientists, that's something that we love doing. We love, answering new questions and then finding new questions from those answered questions, and that's how science continually evolves and progresses. I couldn't tell you the number of new questions that this second paper posed for me. I could probably do 2 PhDs if I had the opportunity to answer all the questions that I wanted to answer.
I mean, when you think about it, there's a million LinkedIn questions to it, isn't there? But I think one of the most important things to point out at this moment, we're talking about 2 papers and 2 researchers to do with sharks. And most people who listen to the podcast will probably be fully aware already, but for those that aren't, sharks are the apex predator in our oceans. And without the sharks to clean up, I say clean up, we're not cleaning up the plastics, we're cleaning up the dead and decaying fish that can create infection within the other aquatic life that's there. So the sharks are there as, for want of a better phrase, as the janitors of the ocean and cleaning them up and keeping them healthy.
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. Sharks play a fundamental role in the ocean ecosystem. Like you said, they predate on injured, on diseased individuals, and that keeps those populations healthy. And if sharks begin to struggle, and they are struggling, they're one of the most threatened species in the oceans. If we start to lose sharks from our oceans, that's going to have knock-on impacts all the way down that food chain. There's no question about it. But not only is it going to have consequences for the ecosystem and marine life, it's also going to have consequences for us humans as well. We depend on sharks to keep fish populations healthy, and that promotes fisheries industries. But we also depend on sharks for things like ecotourism. Ecotourism brings in millions and millions of pounds to countries every single year because people love to go and scuba dive or snorkel with large megafauna like sharks and rays, and losing those from areas can have catastrophic impacts on a country's economy. Definitely. There's no question about it.
I was lucky enough to work in Papua New Guinea a few years ago, and the location, I was based at Oro province on the northern coast, and the resultant factor of overfishing of sharks along that coastline was very, very clear, because we had the coastline, and then a few kilometers out was a band of reefs, and beyond that was another band of reefs. Now the location itself is very, very remote, so it's only fished by local indigenous people. That there's no running water, there's no electric, there's very few electric boats. Everything's done by manual outrigger boats, rowing out to do the catch. So those areas that are very close to land and the shoreline had very minimal aquatic life and quite a lot of almost like fungal overgrowth on the coral reefs, etc. They weren't very clean at all. You go 5 kilometers offshore and the reefs became a lot cleaner, and the aquatic life got a little bit bigger and more variety. But those that were 20 kilometers offshore, where the local guys couldn't row out that far every day, it didn't get infected by the overfishing. So it had the hammerheads that we could see floating around behind your head. It had the great, the oceanic white and black tips, silkies, everything. And it was almost as though the further you went out, the further you were going back in time, because man wasn't destroying it. And effectively, it's a perfect example of how we're kind of cocking everything up. And hopefully
we have direct impacts. There's no question.
And hopefully all the great stuff that you're doing, and people such as yourself that are reporting on this stuff, can actually start to sink into people's heads, and when we start making a difference.
Yeah, for sure. I think I have to stress, so in terms of threats to sharks globally, plastic pollution, looking at entanglement and ingestion, is not the number one threat to sharks. It's not the number 2 threat to sharks. It's a good distance down that list of threats. Without a shadow of a doubt, overfishing and bycatch is the number 1 threat to sharks globally. And I have to stress that to everyone, because although what I'm researching is important, and we do need to understand the variety of different threats that these animals face, we also should be focusing efforts on trying to reduce the damaging impacts of things like overfishing and bycatch. And then after that, you look at things like shark finning, for traditional medicines in certain parts of the world. And then maybe you're looking at things like climate change. So plastic pollution does fall down a little bit lower on the list compared to those threats. So yeah, we definitely need to look at these threats with a broader picture, really, and kind of realize that overfishing is a serious issue for sharks, and that will be the reason we start losing them from the oceans.
Yeah, much like the so-called shrimp boats that are down in Galapagos right now.
Yeah, shocking. Looking at that is just absolutely devastating. I mean, I know several scientific researchers who have been or are in the Galapagos at the moment. One of my good friends, Jade, she was there for 9 months or so, and she is absolutely livid about it. Livid, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. I don't know how they can get away with what they're doing there, but supposedly they are.
Yeah, I can only assume that it's money that talks. But that footage you've got behind your head, I've got my very own footage that's just like that from Darwin's Arch, and we're meant to be there this October. It's not happening. So hopefully next October we won't see too much of a devastating hit on it. I'll just keep my fingers crossed and wait patiently to find out.
Darwin's Arch. Oh,
you need to go.
What a beauty of a site. I'd love to get there.
It's a weird way of diving because everything's lava rock and strong currents. You literally bail in and just negative descent off the dinghy down to about 5-6 meters, hide behind some rocks, and then descend to 15-20 meters and just clamp onto some lava rock. You're not going to destroy anything, but you clamp on and just sit there and have that sight of all the schooling hammerheads just whizzing around for the entire dive. You don't have to move.
It's just the idea of it just excites me far too much. I can't, and I will get there one day. There's no question. I will get there. I also love the negative entry as well. We did negative entries in Mozambique, and it's almost, you have that sort of paratrooper feeling as you're all kind of sailing down.
Yeah. Oh, it's epic. It's epic. In fact, I saw my first tiger shark there last year. We went, instead of an expedition, we went on holiday, me and the missus, and it was Darwin's Arch. And we'd done a few dives on the arch itself and decided to go and do one just around the corner, a little bit quieter on the current front. And it's a large sand area, and I mean large, it's well over the size of a football pitch. But there's huge turtles all just chilling out on the sand and having a siesta. And lo and behold, the missus is just ahead of me, and she starts waving frantically, and I thought, oh, okay, it's another turtle, never mind. And I just see this broad, almost grimace kind of face coming through the water. Oh, is it? Oh, yes. And she was gorgeous, about 4 meters in length, and back on the boat, and spoke to the DM. I was like, oh, it's first tiger I've seen. He said, oh, how big? I said, oh, it's about 3.5, 4 meters, something like that. He said, oh, that's the female. The male's bigger. I couldn't wait to get back in the water and find him. It's fantastic.
Yeah, where there's turtles, you will find tigers.
Yeah. Well, get someone to fund you some research in the Galapagos, mate, and you can come on the trip next October with us lot.
That sounds like a really, really good idea.
I'm sure we can squeeze you on the boat.
Yeah, I'm only little.
Is there any other subjects that you want to have a quick chat about before we start wrapping the show up?
If you start me talking about more sharks, I will not stop. That is the problem. I will not stop.
There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, just give us a rundown then on how people can, follow you, follow the research that's going on, find the links to everything that we've spoken about.
So yeah, you can follow all the stuff that I am doing on Twitter. So my Twitter handle is @KJ_Parton. I'm really, really active on there, always tweeting about science communication, always tweeting about sharks and the research that I'm doing as well. You can find ShaREN on Twitter too, under the handle @SharkEntangle. And on there you will find all the links that you need to report sightings on the Shark Trust's official website. So you can just click through that. If you wanted to go on the Shark Trust website as well to find it that way, there are signposts all over the place for ShaREN on the Shark Trust website, so you can follow the links through there. ShaREN is going to be eventually migrating across to the other social media platforms. So as and when it does, I'm sure you will hear all about that on the Twitter page. But yeah, please do follow. Please spread the word. we want as many eyes as we can get out there, and we want to hear from you. If you see shark entanglements in person, or if you have seen them in the past and have a picture or have any sighting, please report it. And the same applies for you in the future as well. If you see a shark or a ray that's been entangled, please get in touch, and we can get that sighting submitted. And then just spread knowledge about the Citizen Science Project. The more people we have that know about it, the more data we're going to get, and the more of a success this project is going to be. So that's at Shark Entangle on Twitter, and at KJ Parton on Twitter as well, if you want to follow me.
Lovely stuff. Thank you so much for your time, Kristian. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I wish you every success and look forward to lots of new papers that you're going to come up with.
No worries. Thanks so much for having me, Matt. It's been an absolute pleasure.
The pleasure's all mine, buddy. You take care and speak soon.
This is Scuba Goat
Under the sea.
the podcast for the inquisitive diver.